A gang. In 1970, when Ignace Rukiramakumu was 37 years old, he and his family arrived in the first Hutu column that crossed the marshes to settle in the heart of the Ningawa forest, which lies along the Akanyaru River. Ignace had been 26 at the death of Mwami Mutara Radugahiwa, the last great Tutsi ruler, so he was quite familiar with life under the monarchy, and before the genocide he played the role of an embittered elder among his group of friends, preserving a kind of rancid memory of the bad times. The families of Adalbert Munzingura, Fulgence Bunani, Pio Mutungirehe, and Pancras Hakizamungili arrived soon thereafter to live in the forest of Kingawa, which also borders the Akanyaru. Alphonse Hitinyaremye came later, starting out as a day laborer for prosperous Tutsi cattle breeders. Eventually, he acquired and cleared a plot of land in the Nyamambuye forest, which lies closer to the Nyamamboro River. Adalbert, Fulgence, Pio, Pancras, and most of the others grew up belonging to a pack of kids who were always together. In school they naturally associated with Tutsis their own age. They hadn't lived under the former regime and were taught almost nothing about the history of Rwanda. As adolescents, they quit school to join their elders in the fields, where they slaved all day long. Everyone, including their enemies, agrees that they were talented farmers. They went more or less religiously to church, and got together for major traditional ceremonies, marriages, and funerals. Above all, they met every day at the end of the afternoon to drink uruagua, or, on holidays, to share some primus and brochettes. Their favorite cabaret was in Nyarunazi, the hamlet closest to their hillside, but they readily uncorked a can of home brew at someone's house, or walked all the way to the lively cabarets at the shopping area in Kibungo. So the pack of kids became a close-knit gang of pals. They were joined by Alphonse and occasionally by the healer Celestine Mutingirehe, Jean-Baptiste Murangira, who lived in the Rugunga on the Natarama Hill, or a few other youths. Leopold was close to Adalbert and Pio, and thanks to soccer. He was similarly athletic and very tall. His family land was over in Muyange, however, about 20 kilometers from the rivers, so he joined the gang less frequently, turning up to play in soccer matches, hang around the marketplace, or attend weddings. Like Ignace, Ellie belongs to the previous generation. He became acquainted with the gang during the 1994 massacres and the subsequent flight of Hutus into exile in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and he was truly accepted as one of them during their imprisonment. Ellie and Ignace are the two senior members of the gang. Their characters, however, are almost completely dissimilar. Ellie formerly enjoyed many privileges, first as a soldier, then as a policeman, and he has been deeply shaken by his fate. The genocide and its aftermath have marked him. He walks hesitantly, with a stoop. Querulous, docile, almost obsequious, he nevertheless makes a real effort to understand his predicament and to show that he was overwhelmed by events and acted badly. Ignace also knows that he went completely wrong, and he broods out loud over his failure, without making clear whether it's the undertaking itself or its outcome that he most deplores. He is one of the wiliest prisoners we interview. He'll take 1 step forward, 2 steps back, then go in the opposite direction for the next day. Sometimes he affects a complete indifference to others, or stares at us accusingly, uttering bizarre prophecies. As one of Nyamata's select group of leading citizens, Joseph Desiré Bitero did not belong to the gang, but became friends with a few of its members in his capacity as a municipal chief of the Interahamwe. He grew particularly close to Adalbert and Leopold, the two dynamic activists, and Ellie, the retired policeman, whom he consulted before and during the killings. The family of Jean Nidumbahe came from Gitarama in the same wave of immigration as Pio and Adalbert. 10 years old at the time of the genocide in 1994, Jean was too young to belong to the gang, but he worked with them after school in the neighboring fields, hung out at their local cabaret, and kick the ball around on the same soccer field. These days, he does not want anything specific written about his actions during the slaughter. He speaks only of his capture by Tutsi soldiers of the Rwandan Patriotic Front several months after the genocide, when he was living among a horde of ragged pariahs trying to escape along the river, former Interahamwe who was surviving by hunting and pillage, and of his incarceration at the Children's Detention Center in Gitagaga, from which he was released after 3 years. He was never tried on the charges brought against him, thanks to an amnesty granted to detainees who were younger than 14 at the time of the massacres. Today, a stocky youth dressed in shorts and t-shirts, acquired in prison, Jean spends every possible moment, from dawn to dusk, sweating over the family fields in Kibungo. He turns a distrustful eye and an enigmatic smile, which can turn sly or disillusioned, upon all his fellow men, and he no longer wishes to be involved in the affairs of the world, apart from swigging a bottle of banana beer on Saturday nights. Clementine has no ties with this gang beyond the fact that she lives in an adobe house on the hill of Kibungo. She is about 30 years old, with tiny brown freckles that make her delicate features even more lovely. She is Hutu, born in town. An uncle was the go-between for her marriage to Jean de Dieu Ruzindana, a Tutsi, and a very good man despite the drawbacks of the countryside, who had settled me in nicely with his family in Kibungo. Clementine and her husband had nothing in common with the members of the gang, and did not patronize the same cabaret, but knew them well because of their plot of land lay next to those of Pancras and Albert. Clementine remembers. That bunch was famous on the hill for their carousing and tomfoolery. These fellows did not seem so bad, except maybe old Ignace, grousing all his days against the Tutsis. But when they had been drinking, they took sport in spreading misunderstandings and wicked words from cabaret to cabaret. They used to scoff at the Tutsis and promise them serious retaliation, although they never laid hands on them. They were led on by Adalbert, the strongest, the most daring, the biggest mischief maker, always ready to pick a bone over nothing. He could bait anyone without ever losing his temper. Among ourselves, we felt that gang was growing dangersome. Innocent, a survivor, also a native of Kibungo, agrees. Those folks were hard-working, experienced farmers who could be very nice and very helpful. Still, they gradually absorbed the anti-Tutsi frustration and jealousy their parents had brought with them from Gitarama. During the killings of 1992, they suddenly fired themselves up against the Tutsis and returned very threatening. Those brawls ended without consequences in the neighborhood, thanks to the wisdom of the municipal judge. Afterward we sensed that cruelty had hooked them, and could make them go wrong at any time. They seemed more and more hostile, on edge, especially whenever we had news about the war of the Tutsi in Kotani. Yet never did we think they might one day kill at such a great pace. During the period of our conversations, the men in the gang were all still locked up at the penitentiary in Rilima. Joseph Desiree could never leave the section for those condemned to death, but the others gathered at dawn in the common courtyard to go about their compulsory or voluntary activities together: water chores, meals, games. Adalbert, formerly Interahamwe chief of Kibungo and now security captain for their block, preserved his aura intact and showed all his authority during their trial. Still shod in white, Fulgens cultivated his piety. Pio maintained his good humor. Ellie played the scapegoat on occasion, while Ignace continued his role as a bellyacre. Leopold no longer tried to rival Adalbert. He displayed an equal self-assurance, but stayed in the background. To this day he is the only one who, in a certain sense, broke down. It happened in a Congolese refugee camp, where he was still acting as an Interahamwe. Leaving an open-air mass one day, he felt the need to tell everything, to denounce himself to an astounded audience of accomplices and other Interahamwe, who told them he'd gone crazy. Undaunted, upon his return to Nyamata, he promptly offered to spill the whole story to the judges investigating his case. He is therefore one who plied his machete quite vigorously, and also one whose confession is quite precise, with regard to both his own actions and those of his superiors.